thank you for joining us today. I'm Lucy Sauvage, a director from the BDO Tax Risk team, and I'm joined today by Matt Balls, who is an associate director in the same team.
Hello.
So just in terms of an agenda, I'm going to give a brief introduction and then hand over to Matt, who will demonstrate BDO's CCO e-learning module. We will be happy to answer any questions at the end, so if you'd like to type these into the box, which I believe is on the right-hand side of your screen. Okay, so this fairly brief seminar is intended to showcase the e-learning module which BDO has developed in order to help our clients respond to the legislation introduced by the 2017 Criminal Finances Act, specifically the corporate criminal offence for not preventing the facilitation of tax evasion. We're not in this webinar going to be providing any technical analysis of the legislation itself. Hopefully everyone dialed in is now already up to speed on the content and implication of that legislation. If you're not, please make contact so that we can help you with that outside of this forum. So we're just going to start with the recognition that communication and training is one of the key 6 guiding principles in establishing a defence from prosecution, as set out in HMRC's CCO guidance. And our e-learning module is designed with the intention of tackling this principle. And just to emphasise the importance of being able to demonstrate that CCO training has been carried out in your organisation, we are aware that as part of the Dawn raid that was carried out by HMRC in December last year under this legislation, that employees were pulled aside and interviewed, and their knowledge and understanding of CCO was tested. So HMRC are clearly looking at this principle and actually testing it in practice. In summary then, BDO's module aims to educate the users with regards to the existence and meaning of the legislation, provide examples of red flags that users should be looking out for which may indicate a potential problem under this legislation, and to provide some direction on what to do if there is a concern that an issue has been identified, therefore forming part of our client's defence against CCO prosecution. In terms of who in your organisation should be CCO trained, well, all employees are associated persons as defined by the legislation, and therefore many of our clients are carrying out training throughout their organisations. BDO's training has been therefore designed to be appropriate to all staff. However, if you don't wish to do this, as a priority, certainly all those in your business who are able to have some influence on financial transactions should receive some CCO training. So that's typically those in finance, legal, HR, payroll, procurement, etc. And as the legislation applies to all businesses, whatever their size or industry sector, then the e-learning module is equally relevant to the same scope of business. So this module should be able to be used by all businesses regardless of size or sector. So just before I hand over to Matt to demonstrate the module, some few key points which I'm sure Matt will cover in a bit more detail. Firstly, just to point out, it's an interactive, scenario-based online training module. It's designed to sit on your current e-learning system, but if you don't have one of those, it can be used independently. It's built in Articulate Storyline 360, which is an e-learning authoring software package. As I mentioned before, it is suitable for all staff. It takes around 30 minutes to complete, but there's some options available on this. And there's an assessment at the end of the module in order to verify the user's understanding, and which users have to pass in order to complete the module. Where it does sit on an existing learning management system, there is also the ability to track who's completed the training. In terms of pricing, this is based on user numbers and the degree of customization you require. So if anyone is interested, we can talk about pricing outside of this forum. We do believe, though, it is competitively priced, and we've now rolled this training out to well over 35 clients with a greater than 8,000 individual users. So that's some key points. As I say, I will now hand over to Matt, who's going to actually demonstrate the module for you and probably delve into some of those areas in a little more detail.
Thanks, Lucy. Yeah, so what I'm going to do is take you through a few pages of the training just to give you an idea of what the training looks and feels like, and also try to highlight some of those aspects where there is the option to customize. So where we are at the moment is the home screen, and just to navigate you around this screen, you've got a ribbon that runs along the bottom, and this is where you can track your progress throughout the module. We would also expect that you might wish to include your logo in this placeholder square at the top, and at any point throughout the training you can return to the menu as well as accessing resources. And the resources page is where we suggest that you might include hyperlinks to your CCO policy if you've developed one, which hopefully you have, and also things like perhaps a whistleblowing policy, links to the legislation. So any user who is completing the training can access the resources tab at any point. So to get started, there's a few introductory screens which set the scene, talk a little bit about the Criminal Finance Act and the CCO legislation. And then where I want to just focus your attention for a moment is the fact that we have dual path training. And what I mean by this is that we can provide this training in a full version or a slimmed down version, or if you prefer, you can even split your audience and ask the individual user to decide whether they are somebody involved in financial transactions. They would take path option 1, or somebody with less influence on financial transactions might take the shorter version of the training, which is option 2. Once you make that decision, the first section of the training is all around the corporate criminal offences, and this goes into some detail about the 2 corporate criminal offences, the UK or domestic offence and the overseas offence. And we won't spend huge amounts of time going into legislation today, as Lucy mentioned, but I just want to draw your attention as well to some of the other sections, and we'll dip into each of these. So we've got section 1, which goes through the legislation. Section 2 is practical scenarios. That's a bit more interactive to really help the user learn and test some of what they've been learning. Then we go into a brief section around defence and what organisations need to do to put in place their defence file, part of which is this training itself, before getting to the assessment, and that's a 10-question assessment, and I'll be able to show you a couple of examples of the multi-choice type question that you would receive within that assessment section. Let's just go into section 1, and where the module begins is with building up some knowledge, and it begins with the definition of tax evasion and the distinction between tax evasion and tax avoidance, and then gives some practical examples to enable the user to distinguish between what is in fact tax evasion, which is what this legislation relates to, versus tax avoidance. So, just move this out of the way. We have our definitions, and then we get into some of these practical examples, but I don't intend that we go through too many of these at the moment. So the first example here is to do with a restaurant chain, and this specifically isn't tax evasion. I'll give you a second to take in that scenario. What I'm going to do actually is return to the menu, because rather than make this a training session in the CCO legislation, this is much more to give you a flavour of the module. So we'll come back to the menu page. And where I was going to go next is show you an example of some of these practical scenarios. I've actually already got one of these open, and this one is to do with associated persons and groups of individuals. Would they constitute an associated person? So customers, for example, typically wouldn't be associated persons because they're not doing anything for or on behalf of our business. But then employees would be typical, contractors would be typical, investors wouldn't, shareholders wouldn't, suppliers would. And then I get my well done. So it doesn't actually matter in the course of the practical scenarios whether I get these right. I'll get feedback if I get it wrong, but this is all to embed that learning. And perhaps if I just go to one more example of one of these practical scenarios. Well, in fact, in the interest of time, let's skip on to the defences section. And without going into the detail of all of the individual defences, what I've done is move on to what I think is more interesting about the training, which is the ability to be able to highlight to your user base what they need to be looking out for. So what are those red flags? So don't expect people to tell you that they are evading tax. What should they be looking out for? And in this, in our version of the training here, we've got 5 examples of the types of things which people should be looking out for. But because we can customize the training, we can make these more specific to your business, and it's not uncommon for us to add to this list or replace some of these items. So for example, someone asking for a favour that's not in line with our company policies, or somebody feeling under pressure to approve or process an invoice or agree a transaction that they don't think makes sense. These are the kinds of things that we should be looking out for and could be potential red flags. So as well as highlighting what we should be looking out for, there's a section in the training where we can direct the user to what they should do if they believe there could be evasion, facilitation of tax evasion, and the corporate body not having put reasonable procedures in place. What would you like your users to do? Well, this again can be customized, so we'd expect to see your client name here and then the person or persons that you'd like them to contact, perhaps with those contact details listed here. Where I'm going to go next, as promised, is take a quick look at what the assessment looks like and explain a bit about how that works. So the assessment is based on 10 questions, and we tend to set, our recommendation is that you set the pass rate at 70%, but there is the option to customize that as well. And the individual user would complete 10 questions. If they achieve the pass mark of 70%, they'll get a congratulations screen. And what that will do, if you're tracking this in a learning management system, the learning management system will record that that user has passed the training on that given date, and that forms part of your defence and your record that you've trained your staff. So let's have a look at what the questions look like. There will be a random generation of questions. Now, this first question is very straightforward. This is very much just to make sure that people are concentrating at all. The name of the training is Criminal Finance Act 2017, so you would hope that the user would be able to identify where the CCO legislation is found. But many of these questions are more scenario-based, and they're all multiple choice. The next question here is, which of the following statements most accurately reflects the definition of tax evasion? So this is fraudulent activity intended to result in under-declaration of tax. And just one more question. This is an example of a question where we've got a scenario on the right-hand side. So we've got Julie here, an employee of ABC Limited's Spanish branch. She comes to work in the UK for an extended time. She asks Ben in HR to shorten her recorded time in the UK to ensure she does not trigger a liability to UK income tax. So we're asked here to review that scenario and choose 2 answers that we think are correct, and then press submit. So ABC Limited is not liable under the corporate criminal offences. Julie is a Spanish employee. But that's incorrect because there's both a domestic and foreign offence. ABC Limited is not liable as this is a PAYE issue. Well, again, that's not correct. So it must be these last 2. So Julie and Ben are associated persons, and ABC should have procedures in place to prevent Ben from facilitating tax evasion. But that's probably enough to give you a flavour of what the module looks like. What I'm going to do now is return to the slide deck and just highlight again where there is opportunity for customization. So the typical areas where our clients have asked us to customize is to introduce a logo, to use the company name throughout, those red flags that we looked at, and actions. And also what we're able to do is change some of the imagery or change some of the narrative. So if your business is perhaps less corporate than the images that we've included in our training as standard, we can swap those out. We can also slightly tweak scenarios. So we've got some scenarios that refer to a bank. It might be more appropriate to you that we refer to whatever your business does. that's very simple for us to do as well, and that forms part of our offering. So I think where we're going to go next is questions and answers.
Yep, thanks, Matt. I think we've got a couple of questions come through here. First of all, we have the question is can this training be provided in foreign languages?
Okay, yes. So the simple answer is yes, it can, and this is something that we've started to do with a number of clients. So at the moment, we have German, Spanish, Portuguese, and French versions of the module. Absolutely, it can be done. And what typically our clients ask us to do is do the translation, but because there are also individual customization aspects to every different client, it might be that we involve the client in some of the translation where it's very specific to their business. But yeah, the short answer is yes, we can.
Okay, great. And just another question come through. Does this module get updated annually? Is this an ongoing cost that I'm going to have to keep paying?
Okay, well that's a good question, because what we haven't said is that this is a one-time fee. It's not a license arrangement. When we sell the module, you purchase the module and it's yours to use for as long as you wish. What we say is that the legislation is current at the time of the sale, and it's unlikely that there are going to be huge sweeping changes to this legislation in the early years, but were there to be changes, what we would do is update the module and offer that to our client base, potentially for a small fee, to be open and honest. But there's no requirement. There's no requirement to come back to us year on year.
Okay, and I think we've got time for one final question. We've mentioned that the module can sit on a learning management system. I don't have one of these, but I would like to be able to track who has completed the training. Is this possible?
Yes. Yeah. So as you mentioned, Lucy, we've sold the training. So we've implemented the training for well over 35 clients now, and of those, the great majority, let's say 30 or so, have a learning management system. So what they're able to do is pick up the HTML5 file that we provide the training as and drop that into their learning management system, and the learning management system does the tracking. But in the other scenario where you don't have a learning management system, what you can do is manually track this. So let's say that you're rolling this out you're a smaller business, you're rolling this out to 25 or so users. What you might ask is that people capture a screenshot of that congratulations page, email you, and you, perhaps in a spreadsheet, monitor who's completed the training on what particular date. Of course, it's slicker if it's done with a learning management system, but absolutely you can use the training without having one of these.
Great. Okay, thank you. I think we've run out of time for questions, so if there are any other questions there, we'll get back to individuals on an individual basis. So thank you again for joining us. If you do have any questions, or if you'd like to discuss the module further, or to receive or to arrange a full demonstration of the module, please get in touch with either Matt or myself, or indeed your regular BDO advisor. Thank you very much for joining us today. Goodbye.